Hey y'all, so in today's video, I want to talk about why access does not always mean approval. I used to always worry about what people thought of me and would try so hard to live by society's standards. Then I realized that I was created to be different, and regardless of what I did, I would never fit in. So I decided to follow my dreams instead. Join me on this journey as I grow in my faith, go through the ups and downs of pharmacy school, and most importantly, being God's masterpiece. Today's devotion, I want to talk about why having access does not always mean that you have approval from God. I was thinking about stories in the Bible of where we can see this happen, and instantly the story of David came to my heart. So I went back and I looked into this story, I studied it, and I was like, whoa, y'all, my heart was convicted. So in 2 Samuel chapter 11, this is where we see the story of David. Mine says David sinned with Bathsheba and Uriah. So in the spring of the year, when kings normally go out to war, David sent Joab and the Israelite army to fight the Ammonites. They destroyed the Ammonite army and laid siege to the city of Reba. However, David stayed behind in Jerusalem. So before we go any further, there's a lot that is said in this first verse. So the first point that I want to make after reading that first verse, instead of going out to war, David decided to stay at home. In my study Bible, it says that this is the first mention of a leader of Israel staying off battle in time of war. So the first point that I want to make when it comes to recognizing if this door that you have access to, this opportunity that you have access to, is something that you should pursue, is the question of, are you where you're supposed to be? The reason why I pose this question is because David was supposed to be out at war, but he decided to stay behind. So one, he wasn't where he was supposed to be. Are you even where you're supposed to be before you walk through that door or before you pursue that opportunity? Are you in a place of fear? Are you in a place of your past? Because if you are in these places, those are not places where you should be. Places of fear. A lot of times there are opportunities presented to us because we're scared. I'll just take this opportunity because, I'm scared to actually be where I'm supposed to be because I don't know what's there and I'm scared. So I'm just going to stay in a place of comfort, fear. And there's this door that's provided to me in this place of fear, and because I have access to it, I should walk through it. Or are you in a place of your past? A lot of times we love to live in our past because it's comfortable there. We don't like to, go forth as far as healing and moving forward because we're scared of what that looks like, because we're so used to the hurt and the pain that we've lived with for so long. And so sometimes opportunities can be presented that are from our past, but we shouldn't even be there in the first place. And that doesn't mean that we're supposed to walk through that door or we're supposed to pursue that opportunity. So the first thing in the first verse of this chapter, David was not where he was supposed to be. So the first question that I want you to ask yourself, if you're trying to decide whether this is a door that you should walk through, if this is an opportunity that you should pursue, is, are you where you're supposed to be? Y'all, that was just verse 1. Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay, so verse 2. Late one afternoon after his midday rest, David got out of bed and was walking on the roof of the palace. As he looked out over the city, he noticed a woman of unusual beauty taking a bath. He sent someone to find out who she was, and he was told she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. So one of the things that I got from reading this verse is that a lot of times, if you're trying to figure out if this opportunity is something that you should pursue, if you're trying to figure out if this door that's open is one that you should walk through, is when you're trying to pursue, when you're trying to walk through that door, there's a stumbling block. And you're like, ooh, what's that? God does this because he is our good father, and he doesn't want us to make wrong decisions. And so he provides that grace. And so here goes the little stumbling block for David that he should have recognized, ooh, maybe I shouldn't pursue this. Maybe I shouldn't walk through this door. The minute they said wife, it should have been oh, shut it down. Nope. When we try to access an opportunity that is not sent by God, he will try to warn you. Don't ignore that red flag. So in this case, The red flag was that this is someone's wife. Not even just someone's wife, but one of David's soldiers. And in my study Bible, it says that this is one of David's mightiest warriors. A lot of times we like to ignore red flags. And I will be the first person to say that I've done this, where I, was pursuing something, or I wanted something so bad that I ignored all the stumbling blocks, all the red flags, everything that God was just like, no, 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 hey, no, no, don't do it. And I would just ignore it because what I was pursuing, it looked good. It looked just perfectly fine. A lot of times that person, he'll be tall, he'll be handsome, he'll be God-fearing, he'll be saved, he'll be everything that you desire in a person, but he's not for you. And God will send red flags like, no, no, this is not it. But yet we still pursue it just because it looks like what we want. Like, whatever you're trying to pursue, whether it's a school, whether it's a job, it can check off all the boxes off of your list, and it's still not for you because God knows that that is not something that you need to be doing. And so he will try to send those red flags. So don't ignore those red flags. A lot of times we think of it as like, oh man, God doesn't let me have any fun. Oh man, God doesn't want me to have what I want. No, that's not the case. But sometimes what you think you want or what you think is good for you, it's actually not good for you at all. And God knows this. And so that's why he puts those stumbling blocks in there. So it's like, nope, I don't want her to go through this door. So let me try to stop her. Let me try to warn her. So the story continues. And in verse 4, it says, then David sent messengers to get her, and when she came to the palace, he slept with her. So when I read this, I was like, man, how often does that happen to us? When we ignore the red flags, even when, God sends warnings, sometimes we're just oblivious to that because we're acting in our flesh. And so our flesh is going to seek and pursue after what we desire. God will not allow you to sin in order to have access to that opportunity or for you to walk through that open door. If you have to sin to get through that door, if you have to sin to have access to that opportunity, it probably was not sent by God. So later in verse 5, it says, when Bathsheba discovered that she was pregnant, she sent a messenger saying, I'm pregnant. Bathsheba was like, David, you are the father. Honestly, that's like instantly what came to my mind when I was reading this in my Bible. I was just like, ooh, this is like an episode of Maury. Like, what? Anyways, reading this, I was like, oh man, David's probably like, man, I really messed up. Like, he has his foot in the door now. He already went through all those stumbling blocks. He pushed past all those red flags. And now he has his foot in the door. And he's just like, man, like, I messed up. A lot of times when we get into situations, we walk through a door that's not sent by God, we realize it pretty quickly. I feel like God gives us a way out when we get into situations like that if we allow him to. However, David didn't necessarily take those opportunities, and he tried to take things into his own hands. So in verse 6 to 7, David sent for Uriah. This is Bathsheba's husband. So in verse 6 he says, then David sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. So Joab sent him to David. When Uriah arrived, David asked him how Joab and the army were getting along and how the war was progressing. He didn't care. He did not care. But anyway, then he told Uriah, go on home and relax. David even sent a gift to Uriah after he had left the palace. But Uriah didn't go home. He slept that night at the palace entrance with the king's palace guard. So when David heard that Uriah had not gone home, he summoned him and asked, what's the matter? Why didn't you go home last night after being away for so long? Uriah replied, the ark and the enemies of Israel and Judah are living in tents, and Joab and my master's men are camping in the open fields. How could I go home to wine and dine and sleep with my wife? I swear that I would never do such a thing. Uriah is like so faithful and so loyal, and yet David was trying to trick him to go home to sleep with his wife so that way they can think that that baby was his, and that way David will be covered up and all will be perfect and well again. But it didn't really happen that way. Uriah was just like, why would I go home? A lot of times when we get into situations, when we walk through doors that weren't sent by God, God will show us. He will constantly send us those reminders. He will constantly send us like, hey, let me help you. Let me help you. And I feel like Uriah, the way that he acted was God showing him like, hey, Uriah is where he was supposed to be. Uriah is loyal. Uriah is doing everything that he can to support the army, to be, a great soldier. You have a chance to do that too, David. At least when I was reading this is what I took from it, was that, this was David's way out, where he could have seen how honorable Uriah was, took note, and did the same. At this point, Bathsheba was already pregnant, but he could have stepped up and said, you know what? This is what happened. Let's move forward. And I feel like a lot of times when we walk through doors that aren't sent by God, God still provides provision, where he's just like, hey, you messed up. Fine. But here's a way out. I feel like God always provides ways out. And a lot of times we're scared to take it because we're scared of the consequences that comes with it. We're scared of being embarrassed like David was. We're scared of, feeling like people are going to judge us. We're scared of all these different things. And then we don't take that way out that God provides us. And yet we try to take matters into our own hands. But honestly, taking matters into your own hands only makes things worse. And we will see that in this story. So then David says, well, stay here today. David told him, and tomorrow you may return to the army. So Uriah stayed in Jerusalem that day and the next. Then David invited him to dinner and got him drunk. But even then, he couldn't get Uriah to go home to his wife again. And he slept at the palace entrance with the king's palace guard. When I read this reminds me of that video. I think it's like of Diddy and like some person like just having a stare down. I can just picture like God and David just like staring at each other. Like, I'm serious. A lot of times, like, God provides us that way out, but yet we think that we could do a better job than God to try to hide our, mistakes, to try to, cover up all the things that we've done, instead of just surrendering it to him and recognizing, like, hey, God, I messed up, and allowing him to do the fixing instead of us trying to do it. I know it may be so easy to try to take things into your own hands and to try to hide things, because you messed up and you don't want anyone to know. David is a king, he's respected, all these different things, and he doesn't want anyone to know that he messed up, that he did this. So he's like, what, I'm gonna try to take things into my own hands. And he tries to get Uriah drunk to still go home and to still cover up this whole pregnancy, and yet it does not work. Why? When we go through doors that are not sent by God, and yet we recognize that it's wrong, but yet we still want to hold on to that idea that it could be right, we will lie. We will try to do everything in our power to convince ourselves that this is a good thing. Oh my gosh, it's exhausting. Why it's exhausting? Because when you have to constantly lie to yourself, you have to build on that lie. You have to keep up with that lie. You have to remember the first lie that you said to match up with the third, fourth, fifth lie. So it's just like, instead of trying to constantly convince yourself and others why this thing that you have access to is something that you should have, even though it shouldn't be something that you have, it's exhausting. And I'm sure David was probably tired. He was probably exhausted of trying to have to constantly, do all these different things and manipulate Uriah. If you are doing a whole bunch of work to try to cover up mistakes based off a decision that you made that you probably shouldn't have made, at that point, just give it to God. All right, the story continues. So now David is just like, all right, I'm going to have to take this to the next level. The next morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and gave it to Uriah to deliver. The letter instructed Joab, station Uriah on the front lines where the battle is the fiercest, then pull back so that he will be killed. So David took it from 0 to 100 real quick. Being the leader, he had the capability to put Uriah at the front line so that he would be killed. Why? Because he had to get rid of the problem. A lot of times when we, recognize that we messed up and we're trying to cover up our mess, we will do anything necessary to protect our pride. We'll do anything and everything to protect our status. And sometimes we might think like, oh, God is just going to embarrass us if we try to, if we surrender to him and if we're honest with him, he's going to embarrass us. But no, there are plenty of times where I've shared my testimony that I was embarrassed of that encouraged so many people. So it's just like, you look at this story and it's just like, man, what if David actually just surrendered to God and was honest? How would the story have been different? After he killed Uriah, David eventually married Uriah so that they can, give birth to this child. And so he covered it all up so that way no one would know. But the thing is, when we take things into our own hands and we try to hide things, it never works out. The last sentence of that chapter, it says, "But the Lord was displeased with what David had done." So now David is all in. Like, he's not just like one foot in the door. Both feet are through the door. He like set up shop in this little room. Like, he is all in. So in chapter 12, pretty much what happens is God sends a prophet, Nathan, to talk to David, and he shares a parable, sharing with him a story about how there was a rich man and a poor man, and the rich man went to go to a dinner and he took the poor man's item instead of utilizing one of his own. Pretty much saying like, hey David, you are this king, you are great, you have all these things, and yet you wanted to get something that wasn't even yours, even though you have all these great things around you. And I was like, how often are we like that? We have all these amazing opportunities, we have all these great things, but yet we look at everyone around us, we compare ourselves, and we want what that person has. We want what that person has, instead of focusing on what we have right now and how we can work that for our good and how we can use that for ourselves. But no, we want what everyone else has. And so he pretty much shares this story with David, and he's just like, you're the person in this story. You're the one who took something from someone else that did not belong to you, and you need to get your life together. It doesn't say that exactly in the Bible, but that's just a little summary. So now David recognizes, like, yeah, I messed up. He's not halfway through the door, he's all the way through the door, and he recognizes, like, yeah, okay, I messed up. When David says this, the prophet replies to him, yes, but the Lord has forgiven you, and you won't die for this sin. However, further on, it does mention that because of this decision that David made, that there were going to be consequences that his family suffered. One of the things that I pointed out in this story, or this part of chapter 12, was that God forgives. God is our good Father. He tried to warn David in the beginning. He provided ways out even in the middle. And even at the end of all of that, of David ignoring all of that, it says that, but the Lord has forgiven you. So even when you walk through a door that you weren't supposed to, God is still your good Father. However, a lot of times people are just like, oh, so then I'll just do whatever, I'll just be whatever, and God's gonna still be my good Father, so I'm gonna still get what I want. Not quite. The way I like to look at it is like, God is like our GPS. I feel like I've shared this so many times, but God is like our GPS. He has our destination set, and we just have to follow directions, right? However, sometimes we might feel like another route might be a better way. And so we'll take that route. And then it will quickly recalculate, and God is just like, okay, that's the route they took. I still have the plan and the way to get you to the destination that I need you to be at. However, what happens sometimes when your GPS recalculates? It takes a little longer. And so the destination that you could have been at sooner now takes a little longer based off of that decision that you made. But you're still going to get to that destination. So that's how I see this situation. David took matters into his own hands. Like, he had a route planned for him, and he was like, no, I'm going to go this way. And God is like, no, but you're supposed to go that way. He's like, no, I'm going to go this way. And God recalculates everything for him, but it takes a little longer. There's still consequences that he had to endure because of this one decision that he made. And one of the things that I took from this verse was that the decisions that we make don't just affect us. They affect a lot of other people. People that we don't even know. Decisions that we make when it comes to who we date, who we get married to. That affects our future children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, the individuals that they interact with. Like, that is a huge decision. And so you want to make sure that the decisions that you're making, that you are going to God, that you are asking him, like, hey, is this something that I need to pursue? Hey, is this a door that I need to walk through? Or listening to those red flags when you're trying to pursue something that is not sent by him. Because the decisions that we make can affect so many people, that your obedience is tied to someone's blessing. And I know this may seem like a lot of pressure, and it's like, oh my gosh, like, why do I have all this pressure? And it's like, no, We are followers of Christ, meaning that we are going to encourage other people to follow Christ. We are disciples. A lot of times decisions that we make, you want to be very careful and make sure that God is all up in it, around it, and provided it, because those decisions can affect so many other people. If you read further in this chapter, it affected his family in the future. So before ignoring that red flag, stop and think about how this can affect not just you, but how it can affect others. And a lot of times when we think about ourselves like, oh, this is good for me, but is it also good for others? Always ask yourself that question too, because a lot of times we can get very selfish, which I'll admit I've been there. However, if we stop and think about how this affects other people, will we still make the same decision? So I would ask yourself that question when you're contemplating whether this is something that you should pursue. So how to avoid this? Pray. Pray. Prayer is a great way to talk to God and to ask him like, hey God, is this something that I need to do? Is this something that I need to pursue? And he will tell you. Trust me, he will. Pray for peace. In the Bible, it says that, God will provide you with a peace that surpasses all understanding. A peace that surpasses all understanding. A lot of times when there are opportunities that are provided to us, they look so good. Like that job is perfect. Like that career is perfect. That school is perfect. That person is perfect. God, why are you saying no? Why can't I have this? And we get so frustrated. Trust me, I've been there where I'm like, God, why? Why? And we cry out, and praying for peace can really help in situations like this where it may look perfect, it may look right, and people might even call you crazy. When I tell you, I've been called crazy for, not pursuing certain things, but I knew in my heart that it wasn't God. But peace surpasses all understanding. It surpasses things that make sense. And you're like, why am I not pursuing this? This is perfect. It makes sense. And yet you have that peace like, no, I'm going to pass because I know that there are better things for me. And I know that this is not something that God wants for me, even though it looks good. Ask God to provide you with that peace that even when you have to make that hard decision to say no to this opportunity, that he provides you with that peace to be content and not feel like you made the wrong decision. God's peace is reassuring. So in finishing up with the story of David, the decision that he made affected a lot of people. Ultimately he ends up losing his son, and it's just a hard time. One of the things that I recognize from this story is that even though things didn't work out in his favor in that moment because of the one decision that he made, God always knows how to make the broken beautiful. And eventually David has another son, and his name is Solomon, and Solomon turns out to be a great king of Israel. So a lot of times we think to ourselves like, man, I've messed up. I've done like the worst possible thing. I walked through that door that I wasn't supposed to walk through, and we're like, this is it. Like, this is just it. Like, no, God provides grace. Just like in the story, it says God forgave David. God forgives, and he knows how to make the broken beautiful. A lot of times we might think to ourselves that the mistake that we made, it determines our life forever, and that nothing good can ever come of it. And that's not how our good Father is. He has great things planned for us, even when we take that wrong turn. Recognize that you messed up, repent, seek for forgiveness, and God will give it to you. And he will know how to make your broken beautiful. I've been through some pretty tough moments in my life, but looking back, God really turned it around for my good, and I can't even explain to you at how he just turned that brokenness into something so beautiful that it still blows my mind to this very day. I just want to encourage you to know that, like, even if you've taken an opportunity that you knew it wasn't right, you knew it wasn't God, that doesn't mean that God doesn't love you anymore. Absolutely not. Like, he has great things planned for you still. So just trust and believe that he knows how to make the broken beautiful. Just surrender it to him. Seek God before you take an opportunity. This is something that I'm really trying to implement in my life, of really just praying first before going to friends, family, the internet. Like, all these things, but going to God and allowing him to direct my steps. So I hope that this video encouraged you to do the same. I hope you learned something from this video. Comment below ways that you avoid walking through doors that are not sent by God. Comment below. I'd love to see it. Let's encourage each other. We are a family. Let's really like help build each other up and have strength and to get through this Christian journey, because it is rough out here. Okay, y'all already know the deal. You can comment below or you can email me at behismasterpiece@gmail.com. Go out, be kind, be caring, be loving. Do not take every opportunity just because it looks good. And as always, be his masterpiece. Bye, y'all.